Hey everybody, welcome to homerecordingmadeeasy.com, visionrecordingstudios.com, and here on my YouTube channel. And today I want to show you a little trick, or tip, I should call it, not a trick, on how to enhance a bass guitar and get it to sit more full and round and more polished sounding in a mix. So I have a mix here where we're just dealing with a drum kit so far. This track here is being in the process of being mixed. The drums are about 85–90% done, and now I'm on to bass guitar. So one of the things that you may get a lot of, especially if you're mixing other people's work, or if you're mixing some of your own work and you're recording your own bass where you don't have the opportunity to have a bass amp, or a lot of times bass guitars will just be recorded through the console or right into your interface as a direct signal. And that's all fine and well. It's easy to do. Some of the problems you have is that when you have just a direct signal, a lot of times it's a lot thinner sounding, and it loses or is missing some of that nice low end round warm punch that bass is great to have in a mix, especially in like a pop rock kind of a metal type of tracks. So here we have just drums and bass, and the drum kit is just it's pretty standard kind of a pop rock kit, and with the bass. And so let's start off with muting the second track. So here was the drum kit with the original bass DI track, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut off all the processing on the bass track. So this is just the original DI along with the processed drums. Okay, so that's just the original bass DI track, where you can hear there's kind of three sections to that, and the verse sections are kind of long single sustaining notes. In the pre-chorus it's a little bit more rhythmic, and in the chorus it's very rhythmic sounding. So the first thing I did to this bass track is I did what I normally do with all my tracks, is I'm running it through the Slate digital virtual tape machine along with the virtual console collection on the Neve console, because I'm running this as a Neve kind of a channel strip, and then from there into the Neve channel strip, the 88RS by Universal Audio, with doing a very little bit of compression here. So just adding those three plugins, here's kind of what we got from that same section of music, just adding the tape machine, the console, and the Neve. Okay, so that's my standard processing on this bass, which is the standard three plugins that I'm using across the whole mix: the virtual tape machine, the virtual console collection, and the Neve 88RS channel strip. I'm using that on all the drums. I'm going to be using it on all the guitars and all the vocals as well. So that's kind of my standardized foundation of a sound, kind of that Neve vibe with some warm tape compression. But we still have this, and it makes this bass sound a little bit more full, but it's still kind of thin sounding and doesn't have has a little character to it from all the analog processing prior, but it still lacks that that thickness and that round, warm sound. So now one of the things that I did to this particular bass track is I went ahead and I added the Roland Dimension D by Universal Audio, which is a chorus, but it's one of these choruses that are very transparent, very subtle. You can barely tell they're even there, but it just adds a little bit more flavor to the bass to kind of fill it out a little bit. So I'm going to turn this on and I'll start with it off and I will bring it in as we're coming through that section of music again. We'll bring it in here. Take it out. Okay, so it adds a little bit of movement to the bass, but it's still a little on the thin side. So even though we've done all that processing, it sounds a lot better, but it's still kind of missing that real thick, round, warm sound that I'm going for. So here's kind of the tip, or something that you can kind of think about. So what I basically did is I took that bass DI track and I just duplicated it to what I'm calling a bass amp track. And I'm using all the same plugins, the tape machine, the console, and the Neve 88RS. But one of the things that I added to the very first plugin of this chain to take this DI is I ran it through Universal Audio's bass amp room to just give it that bass amp sound. So let's mute the DI track and let's listen to what this bass simulated sound sounds like, the simulated track. DI. You can hear that the bass amp track with using the simulator bass amp room makes that bass sound a lot deeper, a lot warmer sounding. Okay, so now the trick is we're going to kind of blend the two tracks together. So we're using, again, all the same processing as the other track, as the DI track. We're using still the tape machine, and we're using still the console, and we're still using the Neve 88RS with a very limited amount of compression. But now we're also using, very first plugin in the chain is the bass amp room, and blending it together with the bass DI. Now the thing is, let's play these two together now, and we'll kind of just blend them in, and you'll get the nice effect of having the nice crispness, or the thinner sound on top with the DI to let the strings kind of poke through the mix a little bit, but you'll still get now this nice warm roundness from the bass amp itself. So let's listen. Just a DI track. With the amp. Okay, so we still have the thinness or the crispness of the DI track poking through, but now we filled up the bottom end with the bass amp track. But now with the bass amp track, I felt like that I was still, it's warm, but it's starting to sound a little too round. So what I did to the bass amp track is I added another Universal Audio plugin called the SPL Transient Designer. And what I'm using this for is just to add a little bit of attack to the bass amp track. So it just kind of, with that very first hit of the pluck of the note, the transient itself, to kind of bring some of that pop back to it. So it sounds a little bit thicker, a little bit more punchy on the bass amp track. So if we listen to it and turn it on and off, now this is where you're gonna, if you're not listening to this, if you're not listening to this on a good pair of studio monitors or headphones, you may not hear this because it is very subtle. So if you're listening to this on a laptop or something, you may not hear the effect of this at all. So let's go ahead. I'm going to start with it off, and I'm going to bring it in, and you're going to hear the bass. Let me just turn off the DI track, and I'll bring up the bass amp so you can. It's a little more obvious here. So this is without the transient designer. Then I'll bring it in. Here, I'm much more punchy. We'll take it out. Take it out. Okay, so hopefully you can hear the difference here. If you don't have this plugin, you can buy this in the native version. You don't need to buy a Universal Audio version of this if you don't have Universal Audio, but this is one heck of a plugin. I use this a lot on kick drums as well, where if you just want to bring a little bit of attack and a little bit of punch back to the bass in this case, SPL Transient Designer, crank up the attack, keep the sustain kind of at 12 o'clock and the output kind of at 12 o'clock, and it just gives it that little more attack to kind of really get this thing to poke through, especially during the chorus section where it's very percussive and very, very rhythmic, this bass line. So now let's blend the two together, the DI along with the amp room, and see what we can come up with. Nice thick low ends. Okay, getting much closer. Now I'm going to add one last plug-in to this bass amp room. I'm going to add another compressor. Even though we're doing a real light amount of compression, about 3 dB on the 88RS, you can see it over here in the gain reduction meter. You can see where we're doing. This is the bass amp channel. Take a look at the compression. About 3 dB, very low, very controlled. Okay, I want to put a little more compression on that to pull it a little more forward and again thicken it up a little bit. So we're going to go to one of my favorites for a bass guitar. We are going to go to the LA2 by Universal Audio. This is the original LA2, which has a much slower attack. Not a much slower, but a little bit slower attack than the more recent LA2As. Crank it up a little. Okay, it's only about 3 dB of compression, maybe a little bit more in the chorus. And you can hear, hopefully, that you can, it just starts to fill out a little bit more. It gets a little bit more warm, a little bit more up in your face, and just kind of fills out the sounds and gives it a more polished feel to it. So again, I'll just toggle the LA2A on and off. Now again, this is just on the bass amp track, not on the bass DI track. I might add a little bit of compression there as well. So when you take the LA2A or the LA2 out, it feels like the bottom, you kind of lose part of the bottom end. It just kind of feels like it falls a little flat. When you bring the LA2 back in, it feels like the bass gets a little bit more full, a little bit more round, a little bit more push forward. Okay, so that is how you can take just a basic DI track from bass, and you can add some extra flavor to it to really give it that nice, full, polished, warm sound without sounding muddy, but still has the attack cutting through with the DI track. So just by using a little bit of Roland Dimension D on the original DI, that will give it a little bit of movement, not a lot, just a little, very subtle. And then by adding a bass amp simulator, in this case I'm using Soft Tube's Amp Room, but you can use any bass amp simulator. And then I'm processing as normal and then adding a transient designer along with an LA2. And now all of a sudden you have something that started off very kind of thin, kind of lacked character, and added that second track, blend the two together, and get them to sound nice and full and warm. Now, the last thing you could do, if you wanted to, is you can also add a little bit of grit if you wanted to put a little bit of distortion on maybe the DI track if you wanted to just grit it up a little bit. And we could try that here, and then we'll end this video. We can just use something like a stock plugin. We can use PreSonus's, I think it's called the Red Light District, or Red Light Distortion. And again, we want to do this very, very subtly. You don't want this to sound like a guitar. You want it to be very, very subtle. So we're going to turn the drive all the way down. We're going to turn the mix up to 100%. We're just going to stay on the, we'll stay on the soft tube for now. And let's just kind of dial it up. And I think I probably got a preset in here too, but let's just kind of dial up the drive and see what we get here. Turn down that output. A little bit of dirt. That's before. A little too much. Do this with the other bass. So adding a little bit of distortion helps it cut through the mix a little bit more. Now, we don't have the guitars and the vocals in the mix yet. We haven't gotten that far. So I would be doing this in context with the entire mix. This would be something I might add on at the very end if I felt the bass still wasn't cutting through enough, or maybe I would just put this on maybe just in the chorus sections using event effects in PreSonus Studio One. Just drop this plugin on during the chorus only, just to kind of give the bass a little more character during the chorus sections. That's something else that you can do. So hopefully that tip was helpful. That's one way you can take just a standard DI bass and make it sound full and round and warm, and add a bunch of character to it just by duplicating the track and adding some processing. So I hope that was helpful. For more tips, tricks, coaching, and training on everything home recording, head over to homerecordingmadeeasy.com. And for more information on my mixing and mastering services, you can head over to visionrecordingstudios.com. So until next time, this has been David Vignola with homerecordingmadeeasy.com, and I will speak to you all soon. Take care.